You are back on the Mountain Morning Show, and I'm very pleased to introduce to you my next guest I have in studio, Zack Kullis. He is a horror author. He is from Utah here. How are you this morning, Zack?
Doing well, how are you?
It is so wonderful to have you here. Thanks for coming to join us on this spooky Halloween morning, and you have a little know-how in the field of frightening people and touching those nerves that some of us don't always want to acknowledge exist, because horror writing and the genre in general quite terrifies me personally, and I have a hard time with this field of work and with coming to terms with why is there such a huge fascination with horror writing. I mean, we have Walking Dead for one, huge following.
Fantastic.
I mean, story writing's great, but things like that in pop culture, or even always have existed from, you know, Dracula and all these movies that came out in the 1920s that really tapped into the thrill of being scared. Horror writers these days are just going to town with all this stuff, right?
Oh, it's great. Yeah.
So cool. So first off, what got you interested in this field in the first place? As
a kid, I read a lot. I would go down to the library and I would pick out 2 or 3 books, take them home, and I would just devour them. When I was about 10, I remember coming across Pet Sematary by Stephen King.
Oh, yes.
And I was in the library and I held the book in my hands, and I remember just this giddy anticipation, you know, knowing that it was horror, knowing that it was probably a little forbidden, and that my parents wouldn't appreciate me reading
that. You're looking over your shoulder to see if they're trying to get you?
Yeah, and there was just this rush, and I decided that I was going to read it, even though I knew I probably shouldn't have. I was a little young for it.
And that was what was so appealing about it, probably for you, is that that unknown, that I shouldn't be doing this kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I took it home. Well, I actually had to pick out 2 other books, so I could sandwich Stephen King in between those 2 other books. So when I got home, they didn't.
Zack. That's great.
My parents didn't see that I had this book, and I read it that night. And I was up pretty late. I don't remember how late, but I was up very late reading that book, and it terrified me. But I loved it. There were all these emotions that came along with the terror, the anticipation, angst. You know, all of these emotions were just rushing through my system, and I loved it. And that started it.
So why is there a fascination? Because like that, as a little kid, I mean, I'll be honest, when I was younger, I loved Goosebumps books, but now I won't really read scary books. I don't know what it was when I was a child, but I liked it, kind of like that thrill of just something's gonna happen and I can't really stop it.
Yeah. Well, I think as a society, we have a pretty morbid fascination with dark things or with the macabre. I think you'll notice that in traffic accidents. You know, you'll have miles of people backed up hoping to get a peek, you know, and maybe there's blood, you know, maybe we'll see something.
Good point.
I think the population in general has a fascination with it. Horror as a genre is a very powerful medium of storytelling. I think most art elicits some kind of emotional response from the person that's, whether it's a movie, something in a gallery, or a book, it elicits an emotional response from the individual. Horror elicits more core emotional responses from people than any other genre, because those core responses, I think, have a lot to do with our fight or flight responses that we as people have. And horror addresses those. It tweaks those emotions. And it's a very powerful way to tell a story and drags people in. You know, whether it's zombies or Dracula, the unknown, if it's, you know, there are so many different aspects of horror beyond the...
It's limitless. You can
absolutely,
bring into this.
And it's much more complicated and complex than the hack and slash movies or gore fest that I think most of us associate with horror. It's much more complicated than that.
And I like that you bring that up, and I think that's part of what pushes me away from horror films, because I mean, what's all the extra blood for? Honestly, that's why I liked the earlier scary movies. Like I just watched House on Haunted Hill. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's amazing because it's suspenseful, it's scary, but it doesn't like reveal all this blood and gore, but it still got to me because it was just so suspenseful. That's what I love about it.
Right. I think senseless gore, I don't appreciate. I think there are some subgenres of horror that do utilize that type of approach, but there are a lot more subgenres that don't. And I can appreciate those groups or those individuals that don't feel like they have to use senseless violence to elicit some kind of emotional reaction from me. And that's the way I try to do it. Although I don't shy away from gore or violence. I think, you know, it's part of reality. And so I do use that in my books.
And speaking of, so as an author, where do you get your ideas from? Because, I mean, to put it honestly, sometimes when I hear about some of these authors and what they're writing, I'm like, what place are they in to come up with such dark ideas and stories? I mean, you seem like a pretty good-natured guy, so far I think you're great. But
I really am a good guy, but I'm very dichotomous in nature. And I think a lot of authors tend to be. We're not freaks of nature that are walking around, you know, sacrificing goats at midnight to come up with a story.
That's how you got that idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
But we do have kind of a darker mentality when it comes to our thought processes and our imagination. A lot of things that I write about are results of dreams or results of previous experiences, and I kind of blend them all together, or just a twisted sense of enjoyment that I get from that kind of stuff.
Or from watching other people squirm and cringe as they're...
I love that.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Oh, man. That's awful.
And I love making myself squirm, too. It's not just other people.
So when you get scared, you're like, whoa, this is good, this is good.
It's a rush.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's a rush. You get those extra emotions, those endorphins. You get those feelings that, yeah, ooh.
Oh, I like it. Then you know you've got something good. Absolutely. When that happens. So speaking of what we can read from you right now, Realm Crossing, what is this book about?
Realm Crossing is about this individual. His name is Keith Da Silva. He's a physics graduate student who has bumped into all sorts of paranormal things. As a child, he had lost his parents in some fairly gruesome and unexplained events. And when we first meet him, he has this pretty black and white view of reality. And when he is confronted by these beings and these dark entities, his whole perception of reality is just thrown out of whack. It's turned upside down. And in Realm Crossing, he has become adjusted to this hidden reality that's out there with demons and dark spirits and monsters. And he is attempting to combat some of this stuff, and he actually goes into a spirit realm and does some fighting there. So it's a pretty complicated book. There's like a lot going on. There's a lot of good stuff. There's love. There's positive emotions.
So you have that to kind of offset the darkness.
Yes, I think you have to have both. You have to have yin with the yang. I couldn't do everything all dark, but there is a fair amount of dark stuff. It's not for the faint of heart at all.
That's why I'm trying to debate whether or not I should open that cover.
Pick it up, read it. Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, man. Well, where can we find your books? You have 2 websites, right?
I have 2 websites. ZackKullis.com is probably the best website to go to. My books are ebooks at the moment, so they're not available as hard copies. $2.99 for the book. It's hard to beat. Really good. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback.
Excellent.
Although I do have a number of people that have talked to me and told me that they couldn't finish the book.
No kidding. Okay, now I know I'm going to have a problem.
Too intense. But dude, check it out. You'll know within the first 2 chapters if you want to finish it or not.
Right.
If it's too intense.
Okay. Well, Zach, thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
You,
thank you for your time this morning. Be sure to go online and check out what Zach's got in store to creep you out this Halloween. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. We're talking about an Olympic hopeful coming up next, as well as Mark Eaton.